I still remember the exact moment the world seemed to tilt beneath me, the instant my reflection didn't match the person I thought I was. I had been staring into the bathroom mirror, one hand brushing the edge of the wig that had taken hours to perfect, the other clutching the hem of a skirt I had borrowed from the back of my sister's closet. My heart raced like it was running a marathon I hadn't trained for, and then, just as my chest tightened with panic, I heard her voice. "Not to be upset, that's your life." It wasn't angry. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't even curious. It was a soft, steady acknowledgement that made my knees weaken. I turned slowly, hands trembling, mascara slightly smudged, hair askew, and there she was, standing in the doorway, eyes wide but warm, holding a mug of coffee like she had done 1,000 mornings before. Yet in that single moment, everything had changed. I can explain. I stammered, words faltering on my lips. "You don't need to," she said, taking a careful step closer. "I see you. That's enough for now." And somehow, hearing her say that, my chest unclenched just a fraction. Years of hiding, of pretending, of wrapping myself in layers of fear, suddenly felt both heavier and lighter at the same time. I wanted to disappear, but I also wanted to stay, to let her see everything I had buried. I remember the first time I'd ever touched a skirt or smoothed lipstick across my lips. It had been terrifying, a secret I didn't dare speak aloud, a fragment of myself I thought the world would never accept. And yet, here she was, not running, not judging, just standing there with eyes that seemed to say, "I will walk with you, even into this unknown." We didn't speak for long. She set the coffee down on the counter and gestured toward the mirror. "Look at yourself," she said softly. "Really look." I did. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to see beyond the fear, beyond the shame, beyond the trembling hands and the awkward stance. I saw the part of me I had denied, soft, delicate, vulnerable, yet undeniably real. And in that reflection, something shifted. Not instantly, not magically, but enough that I felt the first spark of permission. "Not to be upset," she repeated, stepping closer. "It's your life, and you get to live it." Those words echoed in my mind long after she left the room to make herself breakfast. I traced the wig, the fabric, the makeup, every detail that had been a secret, and whispered them to myself. "It's my life. I get to live it." That day, nothing in the outside world had changed. The city hummed the same as always. My job emails stacked neatly in my inbox. My apartment walls stood exactly where they had yesterday. But inside me, a transformation had already begun. A quiet revolution, the kind that doesn't shout or demand applause, but settles gently in the bones, rewriting the rules I'd been living by for decades. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror across the room, and realized I was trembling. Not from fear, but from anticipation. For the first time, I considered the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to hide anymore. That maybe living fully, even if it terrified me, could be beautiful. And that thought alone was enough to start the journey. The rest of that morning passed in a haze of trembling awareness. Every movement felt amplified. The soft swish of the skirt against my legs, the way the light caught the subtle shine of the lipstick, the faint scent of perfume lingering on my skin, reminders of a self I had hidden even from my own consciousness. I tried to sip my coffee, but my hands shook enough to leave a ring around the mug. She noticed, of course, but didn't comment. She simply watched, her eyes calm, patient, unwavering. "Do you want to talk about it?" she finally asked. I shook my head, because how could I? Words felt brittle compared to the storm raging inside me. Every memory of hiding, of secret purchases and quiet evenings in front of mirrors, came rushing back. The times I had almost been caught by roommates, the nights I had locked myself in the bathroom, the shame and thrill intertwined so tightly that I couldn't separate them. To speak it aloud now felt impossible. She nodded as if she understood. "Okay," she said softly. "Then we'll just be here, together. That's enough for now." And somehow it was. Just her presence, the grounding weight of her attention, reminded me that I didn't need to justify myself. That maybe someone could see me, all of me, and not turn away. Hours passed in quiet rhythm. I caught glimpses of my reflection as I moved around the apartment, and each glance felt like a small challenge. Could I look fully and deliberately and not shrink away? Slowly, carefully, I began to nod at the person in the mirror. Small affirmations whispered under my breath. It's okay. You're okay. You get to exist. That afternoon, she suggested we go shopping, not for me, but together. She wanted to see the spaces I had navigated secretly for years, to understand the textures, the colors, the choices I had made in private. I panicked at first. The thought of leaving the apartment, of stepping into the fluorescent light of the mall, of strangers glancing, it felt impossible. Let's just walk, she said, taking my hand. No one is judging you. And if they are, it's their problem, not yours. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight I hadn't felt in years. The drive to the store was quiet. I fiddled with the skirt hem, my fingers trembling, my stomach tight. But every time I caught her gaze, warm and reassuring, I felt a fraction braver. We wandered through aisles of clothes, soft fabrics that I had only touched in secret, skirts and blouses and scarves. I reached for a soft blouse, hesitated, and then let her help me hold it up. See? It's just cloth, she said, smiling. Nothing scary about that. But for me, it was more than cloth. It was visibility. It was choice. It was a permission I had never been granted before, the right to exist in a form that felt true. By the time we returned home, my hands were sore from carrying bags and my mind was buzzing with exhilaration and fear. I had walked among strangers as someone I had once hidden away. I had smiled. I had breathed. I had survived without hiding. That evening, sitting cross-legged on the floor, unfolding the clothes we bought, she reached over and brushed my hair behind my ear. You're stronger than you know, she said. I swallowed hard. I'm still scared. Good, she replied softly. That means it matters. That means it's real. I stared at my reflection later that night, after she had gone to bed, and whispered to myself, this is my life. Not someone else's rules, not someone else's judgment.
Mine.
And somewhere deep in my chest, a seed of something new took root. Courage. The following days blurred together in a strange combination of relief and apprehension. Every glance in the mirror became a test, not of beauty, not of perfection, but of endurance. Could I meet my own eyes and not flinch? Could I trace the lines of my face and body without shrinking? Could I touch the soft fabric of a skirt and admit it was part of me without guilt? She watched quietly as I moved through these small experiments. She never pushed, never prodded, but her presence was a constant reminder that someone saw me, really saw me, and did not recoil. I found myself speaking aloud the thoughts I had never dared, fragments of sentences that had existed only in trembling whispers. I want this. I'm afraid. I've hidden too long. I want to exist. One evening, she suggested we try something that terrified me almost as much as being caught had in the past. Let's take a walk outside, she said softly. Just around the block. Nothing drastic. I wanted to refuse. The thought of the outside world, of strangers seeing, of being noticed, made my stomach coil like a live wire. I don't know if I can, I admitted. You can, she said, taking my hand, and I'll be with you. The first few steps were tentative. Pavement under my feet, the hum of distant traffic, the occasional glance of a passerby, every element seemed magnified. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but also alive in a way that my apartment, my mirrors, my clothes alone had never given me. She squeezed my hand and whispered, You're doing it. You're stepping into your life. We walked slowly, circling the block, until a gentle wind picked up, carrying leaves across the sidewalk. I laughed, a small, nervous sound, and she smiled. That laugh felt foreign, yet right. It reminded me that the world didn't have to be frightening, that I didn't have to hide every fragment of myself. Returning home, I sat on the couch, still trembling from the experience. I can't believe I did that, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She sat beside me, brushing a strand of hair from my face. You did. And it's a start. That's all anyone can ask. In the following days, we began small routines, dressing together, picking out outfits, practicing simple gestures, and exploring expressions that had always felt forbidden. She encouraged me to journal, to write down my thoughts, my fears, and the little victories that went unnoticed. I found that words on paper had a strange power. They could crystallize feelings I had struggled to name, give shape to desires that had lived in shadows. One afternoon, while folding laundry together, she paused and looked at me seriously. Have you thought about what comes next? I hesitated. I don't know. I'm still figuring out what this life even looks like. She nodded. Then let's figure it out together. Step by step. That night, as I lay in bed replaying the day, I realized something profound. I had spent decades hiding, not from the world, but from myself. Every secret purchase, every quiet hour in front of the mirror, every trembling confession to the empty air, all of it was fear, yes, but also preparation. And now, for the first time, I could see a path forward. A path that was mine. A small, fragile hope began to bloom inside me. It was tentative, easily frightened, but real. For the first time, I imagined a future where I could walk freely, move confidently, exist fully, not just behind closed doors, not just in mirrors, but in the world itself. And that hope, tiny though it was, felt like the beginning of everything. The days that followed carried a new rhythm, one shaped not by fear, but by cautious curiosity. Every morning, I approached the mirror with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The reflection staring back was slowly becoming less of a secret and more of an ally. I studied the lines of my face, the curve of my jaw softened by the subtle contouring I had learned to apply, the delicate sweep of the eyeliner I had practiced for hours. Each detail, small and deliberate, whispered that I was claiming space for myself, a space I had denied for far too long. She noticed the change immediately. One morning, as I traced a streak of lipstick along my lips, she stopped me with a gentle hand on my shoulder. You're glowing, she said softly, her eyes warm with something between awe and tenderness. I froze, unsure whether to feel pride or embarrassment. I'm just trying, I admitted. And it shows, she replied. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. You're showing up. Her words lingered in the room long after she left for work. I found myself repeating them quietly, almost like a mantra. I am showing up. I am present. I exist. For the first time, I realized that my reflection wasn't a threat or a mask. It was a declaration. But stepping into this new reality wasn't without its battles. At work, even the smallest changes in my appearance, slightly longer hair, softer clothing, subtle hints of makeup, drew attention I wasn't prepared for. Whispers followed me down corridors, casual glances lingered longer than necessary, and I felt the familiar twinge of fear curl through my chest. One evening, I recounted the day's events to her, my voice taut with tension. I feel like I'm constantly being watched, I confessed. Like one wrong move and everyone will see me for what I really am. She sat beside me, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. That fear is real, she said gently. But it doesn't define you. You define yourself. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. And slowly, with her presence as a constant anchor, I began to test the boundaries of my courage. We started taking small walks around the neighborhood, me in softer skirts and cardigans, her hand firm in mine. Each step felt both terrifying and liberating. Every time a stranger glanced, I reminded myself of her words. You define yourself. One particularly crisp evening, we wandered into a small park. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and distant rain. I paused on the bridge over a quiet stream, watching the water ripple beneath the streetlights. My reflection danced on the surface, distorted but undeniable. I touched the hem of my skirt, feeling the soft fabric beneath my fingers, and realized that I hadn't felt this alive in years. She leaned against me, whispering, "See? You're stronger than you think." And you're not alone. I closed my eyes, letting the sensation of safety and acceptance wash over me. For the first time, I didn't feel like a secret trapped in the wrong body. I felt like someone being witnessed, acknowledged, and gently guided into the life I had always wanted to claim. Returning home, we brewed tea together and talked late into the night. I shared thoughts I had never voiced aloud, fears of rejection, the loneliness of my hidden years, the exhilaration and terror of finally being seen. She listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, her presence a steady reassurance that my truth would not shatter the world we had built together. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt a small but undeniable shift within me. Fear would still be present. Judgment would still linger outside our doors. But inside, here, in this space of love, patience, and understanding, I had begun to exist fully. Not as a shadow of my desires, but as the person I had always been beneath them. For the first time, I believed that I could step forward, one deliberate, trembling step at a time, into the life I had always dreamed of, a life where authenticity was not a secret, but a way of being. The following morning carried a quiet intensity, as if the world itself had shifted slightly while I slept. I rose early, the soft hum of the city outside the window mixing with the nervous thrum in my chest. Today felt different. Not because anything had changed outside, the apartment, the skyline, the familiar hum of traffic remained the same, but because I was changing inside. I dressed carefully, selecting a blouse I had once deemed too bold, a skirt soft enough to feel comforting but structured enough to give me confidence. As I brushed my hair, I studied every detail, memorizing the way it fell over my shoulders, the subtle curve of eyeliner along my eyes, the delicate shade of lipstick I had chosen. Each element was an act of courage, an assertion that I belonged not in the shadows, but in the light of my own truth. She watched quietly from the doorway, holding her morning coffee, eyes calm and unjudging. "You look like yourself," she said. I paused, uncertain if I should feel flattered or ashamed. "I am myself," I murmured, though the words felt foreign, almost daring. "That's what I mean," she said, stepping closer. "You're finally letting yourself exist." Her approval was a lifeline, steady and unwavering. But the world outside our apartment remained a looming challenge. I had grown used to the sanctuary of home, the private rehearsals in front of the mirror, the small victories that existed only in our shared space. Yet I knew I couldn't remain hidden forever. Life required more than whispered affirmations and safe corners. That day, she suggested we take a bus into the city, not for anything extraordinary, just to experience the public world together. Me in full presentation of the self I had been hiding, her by my side. My stomach clenched at the thought, my mind racing with every possible scenario, stares, judgment, ridicule. "I can't do this," I said, voice tight. "Yes, you can," she replied firmly, taking my hand. "And I'll be with you. Every step." We boarded the bus, and each moment felt magnified. The hum of the engine, the scent of rain on the city streets, the occasional glance from strangers that I initially perceived as scrutiny. But slowly, with each passing block, I noticed something remarkable. Most people were indifferent. Their lives were their own, their attention fleeting. My fear, built over years, was far greater than reality. By the time we stepped off at a quiet city park, the panic in my chest had dulled to a steady rhythm of cautious exhilaration. She guided me to a bench, sitting close, letting our hands rest together. "See," she whispered, "you're stepping into your life one moment at a time." I nodded, words failing me. The world was no longer a threat, at least not completely. It was a landscape I could navigate, slowly, deliberately, without losing myself entirely. That night, after we returned home, I journaled long into the evening. Every detail of the day, the bus ride, the anxious thrill, the simple act of walking through the park, became a testament to my growing courage. Writing it down crystallized the experience, made it real, allowed me to see the progress I had been too afraid to acknowledge in the mirror. She joined me later, curling up beside me on the bed. "You've changed," she said softly. "I know," I whispered. "And I'm scared. But I also feel alive." Her hand rested gently on my arm. "Fear means you're moving forward. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the choice to keep going anyway." Her words sank deep, settling in my chest like a steady heartbeat. I realized then that my transformation was not just about appearance, not just about clothes or makeup or the reflection in the mirror. It was about claiming my life, choosing authenticity over shame, presence over hiding. Every small act, every skirt worn, every glance met, every trembling step outside was a declaration. And in that declaration, I began to feel something I hadn't allowed myself to believe in decades: freedom. The following week became a crucible of quiet self-discovery. Each morning, the mirror greeted me with the same reflection, but every glance carried a growing awareness. This was no longer a secret life I was sneaking into. It was becoming a lived, breathing reality. I dressed deliberately, choosing outfits that blended courage and comfort, each garment a small rebellion against the years I had spent shrinking. She noticed the subtle shift immediately. "You're holding yourself differently," she said one morning, watching me move through the apartment. "There's a lightness to your posture, even when you don't realize it." I felt a twinge of embarrassment. Lightness? I was still terrified of being seen, still bracing for judgment. But her words were a lifeline, reminding me that perception begins within, that the reflection in the mirror is only part of the story. That day, she suggested something far bolder: a small gathering with a few close friends. Nothing overwhelming, just an evening in a familiar apartment where I could test the boundaries of my newfound identity. My first instinct was panic. Even imagining the gaze of others, the possibility of being recognized as something different, tightened my chest into a fist. "I don't think I can," I admitted. "You can," she said firmly. "And I'll be with you. I'll make sure this space stays safe." We arrived at the gathering, a quiet mix of familiar faces and warm smiles. At first, I hovered near the edges, my hands trembling, my voice uncertain. But she stayed beside me, her presence a steady anchor. Slowly, I allowed myself to participate, to answer questions, to laugh without hiding. Every interaction was a victory, a small but profound claim to authenticity. One friend remarked on my outfit with genuine admiration. I froze for a second, unsure how to respond, but she leaned in, whispering, "Just smile. That's enough." And it was. That simple permission, to be myself without explanation, opened a door I hadn't dared touch before. The night continued with small triumphs: a shared joke, a story recounted, a compliment accepted, without flinching. Each moment chipped away at the old fears, the ingrained shame, and left behind a tentative confidence. By the time we returned home, I felt exhausted, exhilarated, and more alive than I had in years. Later, as we sat quietly in our apartment, she took my hands in hers. "Do you realize how far you've come?" I shook my head, words failing me. "It doesn't feel like progress sometimes," I admitted. "It feels like I'm still fighting every second." "That's because courage isn't a destination," she said softly. "It's a daily choice. And you're making it every single day." Her words lingered long into the night, echoing in my mind as I finally allowed myself to rest. I realized that my transformation wasn't only external. It wasn't just clothing, makeup, or posture. It was internal, a reclamation of my identity, my voice, my presence. It was an acknowledgement that I had the right to exist fully, in every aspect of myself. The next morning, I woke with a quiet determination. I would face the world, step by step, even if fear accompanied me. I would embrace this life that had once been forbidden, hidden, and uncertain. And most importantly, I would continue to allow myself to be seen, to be known, and to be loved, starting with myself. That night, as I gazed into the mirror, I whispered softly, "This is my life. I get to live it. And I will." The days after the gathering were quieter, but no less intense. There was a new weight to my existence, Not a burden, exactly, but the gravity of being fully present in my own life. Each morning I dressed, I was reminded that these choices were no longer just private experiments. They were declarations. Each skirt, each brush of makeup, each careful step outside was a statement. I exist, and I will not hide. She noticed the changes in me, too. One evening, while we were preparing dinner together, she paused mid-chop and studied me. "You're different," she said softly, almost to herself. I felt a flutter of panic. "Different how?" "Not scared," she said. "Not hiding. You're lighter, somehow. You're letting yourself breathe." I wanted to argue. I was still scared. Every interaction outside our apartment, every glance from a stranger, still sent a jolt through my chest. But her eyes didn't see the panic. They saw the truth I was only beginning to accept, that I was stepping into the life I had always wanted, even if it terrified me. A few days later, she suggested an idea that nearly sent my heart into my throat. "Why don't we try a small outing? Just you and me. No errands, no work, just walking in public." The thought alone was enough to make my stomach twist. The world outside had always felt like a spotlight aimed directly at my insecurities. I don't know if I can," I admitted. "You can," she said simply, taking my hand. "And I'll be there. You won't be alone." We started slowly, stepping onto the sidewalk with careful precision. Each step was measured, each glance over my shoulder a test of courage. People passed by, indifferent, unaware. And yet, my pulse raced with every footfall. I felt exposed in ways I hadn't anticipated, vulnerable and alive all at once. Halfway down the block, I froze. A car passed, the driver casting a fleeting glance that sent my chest tightening. She squeezed my hand. "Breathe," she whispered. "You're safe. You're here. This is yours." Her words had a grounding effect. I inhaled, exhaling slowly, and allowed myself to continue walking. Step by step, block by block, I felt the knot in my chest loosen. For the first time, the world didn't feel like an enemy. It was a stage, yes, but one I could occupy without fear. By the time we returned home, I was exhausted, but in that exhaustion, there was exhilaration. I had ventured beyond my comfort zone, beyond the mirrors and shadows, and survived. More than survived, I had begun to thrive. That night, as we curled up on the couch, she said softly, "Do you feel it? The difference in you?" I nodded slowly. "I do, and it scares me. But it also excites me." "Good," she replied. "That means you're growing. That means you're learning to live on your own terms." I lay there, tracing her hand over mine, letting her words settle. I realized that transformation wasn't just about clothes, appearances, or external validation. It was internal, a reclamation of my identity, a declaration that I would no longer shrink, no longer hide, no longer deny myself the life I had always longed for. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine the future, a life lived fully, courageously, authentically. Not free of fear, not free of challenge, but free of shame. I drifted to sleep that night with her beside me, hand in hand, heart racing, and a quiet but unwavering certainty. I am becoming myself. And this life, with all its uncertainty, is mine to live. The following morning brought a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. My reflection in the mirror seemed simultaneously familiar and foreign. The soft waves of my hair, the gentle curve of my eyeliner, the carefully chosen outfit, all felt like armor and declaration at the same time. I traced the lines of my face, inhaling slowly, reminding myself that this was real, that this was not a fleeting experiment, but a step into a life I had always secretly longed for. She entered the room quietly, her presence steady and grounding. "You look radiant," she said softly, smiling. I flinched slightly. Radiant? The word felt heavy, with expectation. I wanted to argue, to hide behind modesty, but she didn't wait for my response. No need to explain or justify. Just be. And that, I realized, was the hardest lesson, to simply be. To allow myself to exist fully without apology, without qualification, without fear. That day, we decided to take a longer walk, deeper into the city, past streets I had once avoided, through shops and cafes that had always seemed intimidating. My chest was tight, my palms clammy, but with her hand in mine, I felt a fragile courage building. Each step was a challenge. Every glance, every passerby, felt loaded with judgment, though most were oblivious. And yet I pressed forward. We stopped at a small cafe, and she gestured for me to choose our table. My hands shook as I lifted the menu, but I managed to smile, my voice quieter than usual. "This way," I whispered, guiding us to a corner seat. Inside, the smell of coffee and pastries mingled with soft chatter. A barista looked up and smiled, handing us menus. I froze for a moment, fear prickling at the edges of my mind, but then I remembered her words. "You define yourself." I exhaled, taking a tentative sip of courage, and placed my order with clarity. It wasn't perfect. My hands trembled slightly. But I had spoken. I had acted. I had existed in the public eye without retreating. Later, walking back through the city streets, the wind tugged gently at my hair. I laughed, a spontaneous, light sound, and she caught it, smiling. "See," she said, "you're stepping into your life, and it's beautiful." Returning home, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and elation. The world had not crumbled. No one had mocked me. I had survived, not just survived, but thrived in small, delicate increments. That evening, I sat before the mirror once more, brushing my hair and tracing the curve of my lips. I whispered to my reflection, "You are allowed. You are alive. You belong." She came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "You've grown so much," she said softly, "and you'll keep growing. This is only the beginning." Her words resonated in my chest, a soothing balm to years of hidden fear. I realized then that transformation wasn't a destination. It wasn't a single act or a single outfit. It was a process, ongoing, deliberate, sometimes terrifying, sometimes exhilarating. And I was no longer walking it alone. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. The fear remained, yes, but it was no longer paralyzing. Instead, it had been tempered by love, patience, and the quiet courage of simply being seen. And for the first time, I understood that living authentically wasn't just a choice, it was freedom. The weeks that followed felt like a delicate dance between fear and liberation. Every morning, I approached the mirror with a quiet determination, tracing the lines of my reflection, adjusting hair and makeup with steady hands that had once trembled with shame. Each outfit became a statement, each glance a small declaration. I exist, I am real, and I will not hide. She watched me with a quiet pride, never pushing, never questioning, just being present. Her presence became my anchor, a reminder that someone saw me fully and loved me anyway. I began to realize that her acceptance was not just comforting, it was empowering. It allowed me to confront fears I had long buried, to test boundaries that had seemed insurmountable. One crisp evening, she suggested something I had dreaded for years. "Let's attend a small gathering," she said softly. "Just a few people. Friends. No pressure, no judgment." My heart clenched at the thought. The idea of being exposed, of being seen beyond the sanctuary of our apartment, sent a ripple of panic through me. I can't," I whispered. "Yes, you can," she said, squeezing my hand. "And I'll be with you every step." We arrived at the gathering, a cozy apartment filled with soft lighting and familiar faces. My chest tightened, my palms sweated, and my voice caught in my throat. I hovered near the edges, afraid to speak, afraid to exist too fully. But she stayed close, her presence steadying me, a reminder that I wasn't alone. Gradually, I began to participate. I laughed at jokes, shared small stories, and even accepted compliments, without flinching. Each interaction felt like a small triumph, a reclamation of space I had denied myself for decades. By the end of the evening, I had discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. Walking home afterward, the night air crisp against my cheeks, I felt a strange exhilaration. I had stepped into the world fully, cautiously, deliberately, and I had survived. More than survived, I had claimed a portion of life that had always felt out of reach. Back in the safety of our apartment, she guided me to sit by the window. The city lights shimmered like distant stars, and I realized something profound. The world had not rejected me. My fear had been far greater than reality. The judgment I imagined was mostly in my own mind, the weight I carried mostly of my own making. She reached for my hand, her touch gentle but firm. "Do you see it now?" she asked. This life is yours. You don't have to hide anymore." I nodded slowly, tears pricking my eyes. "I see it," I whispered. "And it's terrifying but beautiful." Her lips brushed my temple, a quiet affirmation that I was not alone. In that moment, I realized that my transformation was not just about clothing or appearance. It was about identity, courage, and the reclamation of a life I had long denied myself. Every small step, every outfit, every glance, every trembling moment of vulnerability had led me here, fully seen, fully present, and fully alive. That night, as I lay in bed, I traced her hand with mine and whispered a vow to myself. I will continue. I will live. I will exist. And I will do it authentically, without apology. For the first time, I felt a peace that was not fleeting, a freedom that was not conditional. I was not just surviving in the shadows. I was stepping boldly into my life, and I was ready for whatever came next.